What's going on, everybody? C4 here today, bringing you the final 32-team mock draft. You're going to see her on Beast Mode TV. I think this is the fourth one, including, the full 32-team 7-round mock draft. It's the last time. Beast Mode TV is simmering down with the draft content as we get ready for Thursday night, which is going to be an awesome night. I hope you guys all tune in here. And then after that, we're going to be sizzling down with the draft content, sizzling up with the Madden 18 content. Oh yes, all the hypothetical clickbaity videos will be coming up. But today, let's relish the moment in the final mock draft. So this is going to be a full 32 team. As always, this is your first time stopping by, subscribe if you enjoy it. And feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below and agree, disagree. Let's see what happens. So, number one, the Cleveland Browns. Myles Garrett, defensive end from Texas A&M. He would come in and be the defensive end one. Pair him with Emmanuel Ogbah, who switched from an outside linebacker to a defensive end. And that was a pretty good young pass rush. By pretty good, I mean almost. You need a good defense to be able to win in that division. Steelers, historically speaking, Bengals, Steelers, and Ravens have had really good defenses. The Cleveland Browns have not. Now you get a true franchise player on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think you can butcher this one with Myles Garrett. I don't think. But for saving grace, the only alternative pick here would be Mitchell Trubisky, and that would just absolutely destroy all the draft boards. It'd be a typical Cleveland Brown pick. But I don't think they're going to be, honing in on Trubisky here. I think, they're going to be smart. They're going to go with their head. They're going to go with their heart, maybe, and get Myles Garrett. He's the clear-cut #1 overall prospect. I don't think you could mess this one up. Then again, it's the Browns. Going number 2, the San Francisco 49ers. I firmly believe they will be trying to trade down. I think the trade partner to look at would be the Carolina Panthers, trying to trade up to get Leonard Fournette. Maybe a team like the Saints. Maybe. I don't really know who the Saints would really want to trade up for. So many spots from 12 or 11, wherever they are. I'd actually have to add 11. But I do think the pick here, I battle between 3 different names. I think Jamal Adams is one to consider, obviously with John Lynch now. Maybe he may think, I can truly evaluate a safety. I think I can see Jamal Adams coming in as a starting strong safety to pair with Eric Reed. But I think they may be fine rolling with Reed and Jaquiski Tartt as the 2 safeties back there. I mean, none of those guys is really a natural strong safety, but, maybe they think that could work. Another spot would be Marshawn Lattimore, the cornerback, after they just released Tremaine Brock. I think, that whole cornerback room has blown wide open, but selecting a corner at number 2 is an incredibly risky pick, as corners have probably the highest bust rate out of any position in the draft. So I think they go with the safest pick. It's a pretty popular pick right now. It's from the alma mater of John Lynch. That's going to be Solomon Thomas, the defensive end from Stanford. Should be able to come in right away and be a defensive end 1, and they'll probably pair him, I think it will be with DeForest Buckner, and they'll move Eric Armstead inside as a defensive tackle. But again, I mean, it's still that big transitioning period from a 3-4 to a 4-3. I think you just go with the safest kind of prospect. And I think with Jonathan Allen, maybe there's still some concerns over the shoulders. I've heard countless people say that not a lot of teams at the top are really putting much stock into that. He's still, it sounds like, top 5 prospect. That is Jonathan Allen. But I think a guy like Solomon Thomas, a little bit more versatility. I think that's probably what gives him the slight nod over a Jonathan Allen. But I think Jonathan Allen is I personally would think Jonathan Allen is a safer prospect, but I think there is certainly more upside with an athletic freak type of Solomon Thomas. Going number 3, the Chicago Bears. Speaking of Jonathan Allen, according to Twitter, this sounds like a controversial pick. The Bears going Jonathan Allen, defensive end from Alabama. I think he can go in right away and be a defensive end 1 on that team. I mean, right now their starting defensive ends are a combination of Mitch Unrein, Hicks, and Jonathan Bullard. You need to work on getting after the quarterback with your front 3. The only other alternative pick, I've seen Jamal Adams a lot of times, but I still don't think it's going to happen. I think Adrian Amos is a solid starter with upside. Still has a lot of potential, had a great rookie season. You just paid Quentin Demps in free agency some decent money, and he was pretty good with the Texans last year. One of the best defenses in the NFL. He was a solid starter. So I think you look at the safety core, and you're like, all right, certainly Jamal Adams could offer an upgrade for one of those guys, and he's a safe prospect. But what else do we have here? Our fucking defensive ends are not very good. And getting a guy like Jonathan Allen, sure, there is slight concerns with his shoulders. I personally don't think there's going to be too much stock in that. So, obviously shouts for, similar to the 49ers, Jamal Adams, maybe a Marshawn Lattimore could go to the Bears, but I think improving their front 3 should be what they go. And right now they can get a immediate starter in Jonathan Allen. Going to number 4, the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's going to be Leonard Fournette, the running back from LSU. He'd come in and be the running back 1 with TJ Yeldon. It seems pretty fair to say that the Chris Ivory experiment is over. I think the only alternative pick here could be maybe an O.J. Howard. They're fairly weak and fairly thin at the tight end position for the Jags, and maybe they want to complete their offense. But I think you have to go at Leonard Fournette unless maybe a team like the Carolina Panthers trade up and snipe him in front of you for the longest time. And I still personally feel like Leonard Fournette, it's not the perfect fit there in Jacksonville. I think a running back more so of a, like maybe, personally, if the Jags want to, maybe they could trade the Panthers and they come up and grab Leonard Fournette. I don't know why they would do that. I don't think there's any team between the Panthers and the Jags that would take the running back. But, it is what it is. Maybe just to be safe, you can get something. But personally, with the offense, the thing is, Leonard Fournette, you need to commit to run the ball. And a team like the Jags, they want to throw the ball. They want to set up the play action and throw the ball. Let Blake Bortles, who's big arm, throw it to Allen Robinson, throw it to Allen Hurns, throw it to Marquise Lee. Guys like that, spread the field. And more so, I think you can utilize a pass-catching back, a primary pass-catching back, like a Christian McCaffrey, like a Dalvin Cook, more so than a Leonard Fournette. Because a Leonard Fournette, you really need to be a team that commits to running the ball. And that doesn't really fit the Jags' MO if you're basing it off of the success they had 2 years ago. But then looking at last year, maybe you could also have the argument that they need to run the ball more, take less of the pressure off Blake Bortles, make it so he doesn't have to throw the ball 4 times a game for them to win, because clearly the turnovers have been an issue. And I mean, offensive line aside, I think Leonard Fournette will be the pick here. I personally think McCaffrey's a better fit. But, I mean, Leonard Fournette, potentially, if he could stay healthy, is a once-in-a-generation running back, and you can't really pass up on that. Like I said, the only alternative pick I see maybe could be O.J. Howard, but Fournette is the pick here. Going over 5, the Tennessee Titans, are them selecting Jamal Adams, the strong safety from LSU. Kind of flexible, can play strong or free. I think he's more suited to be a free safety in the NFL, and in the box free safety would probably be, in the box strong safety. I think he'd be strong safety 1 on the Titans. He'd bump Denoris Susie, who's been a free agency signing after he had a pretty big year with the Buffalo Bills. Again, Jamal Adams, best player available. I'd say, along with Myles Garrett, may be the safest pick in the draft. Fournette certainly could be in that conversation. O.J. Howard could be in that conversation. But where Fournette has injury concerns, O.J. Howard has not great production history. I think after Myles Garrett, Jamal Adams might have to be the safest prospect in this year's draft class. And the Titans, not a major need at safety, but there you go, best player available, improving that secondary. And, he's an absolute upgrade there. The only alternative pick I could see maybe going for an O.J. Howard, but I think they may want to wait until they pick again at 18 to potentially address the tight end spot, because you still have Delaney Walker there, who's not really injury prone. He's on the field a lot, and he's still a dynamic tight end. Obviously he's getting up there in age, but I think maybe a guy like Jamal Adams certainly would bring more to the team next year. A team that's really looking to win the AFC South next year and have a shot at contending for maybe an AFC championship. I don't really want to go all the way and say that they're going to be Super Bowl contenders, but I think the Titans are going to be the preseason darlings of this upcoming season. So you got that going for you. So Jamal Adams is the pick. Going number 6, the New York Jets. I'm selecting O.J. Howard, the tight end from Alabama. He'd walk in, be tight end number 1 on that team. I think Sean McDermott, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he is a disciple of Jim Johnson, that he would not reach for a quarterback at this spot. Clearly, quarterback is a dying need, but I think they really do want a quarterback. They have a high enough pick in the second round that they're going to be able to get whatever one slips. There's going to be at least 3 guys that potentially will slip, and they can grab one of that. But especially when there's no clear consensus number 1 quarterback really this year, I think that would be the best spot for them to draft it. I think personally how my draft goes, I don't want to spoil any things, but I personally, me having Davis Webb fairly high, Davis Webb will be available in the second round. And then I really have 2 other quarterbacks that they could potentially get in the second round. So then, look at the team. They have shit off of the tight end position. You can get O.J. Howard, who again is regarded as potentially, even with Myles Garrett in the consideration, in the same conversation, the best player in this year's draft class. And getting that kind of playmaker, the tight end spot, would make whoever they have at the quarterback spot's life a lot easier. I think O.J. Howard has to be the pick there for the New York Jets. Alternative pick, maybe they reach for Mitch Trubisky. They see him as the starting quarterback. I've seen Deshaun Watson a couple times, but I think how they want to build their offense, I think they might go with a more traditional quarterback with the Mitch Trubisky versus maybe a runner. I mean, their offensive coordinator was in Saints. He was a Saints wide receiver coach. Just using that comparison, I know it's not the strongest comparison, but maybe they'd want a pocket passer, more so a guy that can usually use his feet and doesn't stay for all his reads. So I think Trubisky could be the alternative pick here, but I think O.J. Howard makes the most sense. Go number 7, the L.A. Chargers, not the San Diego Chargers. Very popular pick right now, makes a lot of sense for me. And it's Malik Hooker, the free safety from Ohio State. He'd walk in and be the free safety one, I believe. Bumped Dwight Lowry from the spot. Again, big-time playmaking free safety. A lot of people compare him right away to Ed Reed. And they need a big-time playmaking free safety. Just a safety in general after they lost Eric Weddle. They haven't been able to recoup that. And, again, popular pick, not going to keep going on about it. Makes a lot of sense. He will be available because of the injury concerns. There you go. Only alternative pick. I've been on this for quite some time. Is I think they may want to look at offensive line and protecting Phillip Rivers. And if that's the case, I think the only offensive lineman that you'll be able to draft in a draft that's pretty weak for offensive linemen, but you go with the guy with the highest ceiling, and that would be a Cam Robinson. But I think Hooker will be the pick here. Go number 8, the Carolina Panthers. This is where I go off the board a little bit. I don't think I've actually seen one mock draft that had this pick, but for me, it makes sense. Carolina Panthers at number 8, going Marshawn Lattimore, the corner from Ohio State. I think he'd come in right now, compete for corner 1, would most likely be a corner 2. James Bradbury had a great season last year. You'd have Captain Munnerlyn playing in the slot, and then you have Daryl Worley. I just don't think, looking at their starting cornerbacks, it's going to be Daryl Worley on one side, James Bradbury on the other, and Munnerlyn in the slot. That's, you look at that and you go, okay. So they missed out on Fournette, perfect fit. Leonard Fournette to the Panthers is probably the most perfect fit of this year's draft class. So what else do you got? That is not a very good secondary. And when I watch the Panthers, that's the biggest question is what happened with the Carolina Panthers. Certainly you could put a lot on Luke Kuechly being injured and just the health of the team. But then you got to look at maybe the offensive line, but there's no one at 8 really, I think, that you could pick to really improve that. Maybe a Cam Robinson, but I think that's not the best available pick there. So then you look, you have Marshawn Lattimore, who's a bona fide top corner, undisputed top corner in this year's draft class. Even debatably when Sidney Jones was there. So now Sidney Jones is out with an injury. It's even more so a Marshawn Lattimore. He can come in, solidify that secondary. They got absolutely torched. Just the one game you had to keep referring to is when they got just battered by the Atlanta Falcons. I did not see anyone in that secondary capable of making plays. They got older. They got Mike Adams back there. I just think you add some fresh blood. And Marshawn Lattimore, a guy that could come in and compete with the air raid teams in your division. The Saints throw the ball a lot. The Falcons throw the ball a lot. And if you have a weak secondary, they are going to pick on that. That secondary was not the same without Josh Norman. So go get yourself a starting corner in Marshawn Lattimore. Pair him with James Bradbury, and then boom, you're good. Alternative pick for this would be them trading up or the very minimal chance that Fournette slips. But I think Fournette would be the other pick here. Going to number 9, the Cincinnati Bengals. This was a really tough one, much like the 49ers. It was the next one that was kind of difficult to pick from. I've been going with Derek Barnett, the defensive end from Tennessee. Looking at the Bengals and what they can improve upon, I think getting more pressure on the quarterback could be it. There is the temptation to go offensive line here after they got absolutely pillaged. But again, at number 9, I don't see much like where people shit on the quarterbacks this year's draft class, same goes for the offensive lineman. Personally, I wouldn't really want to touch any offensive lineman before the first 15 picks. So maybe they could be contenders to trade down. But then you look at the best player available. The Bengals always want to get edge rushers. I don't know if Paul Gunther has a fetish for edge rushers, but I think they're going to be looking at getting an upgrade over Michael Johnson. And then he goes like, who do you have the best edge rusher right now? They could go with a lengthier guy like a Taco Charlton to, really comparable to what they have in Carlos Dunlap. But I think they're really going to like the production of a Derek Barnett, and he fits that scheme. He's got to be on the field a lot. I think a guy like Derek Barnett can't really be in a heavy rotational defensive front. He needs to be on the field, grinding guys down. He's not an exceptional athlete, but he has probably the best technique. I think he probably has better technique than Myles Garrett. I mean, the sacks don't lie. He had better protection in the SEC than Myles Garrett did. I think he'd come out on the Bengals, be defensive end too, with, pairing him up with Carlos Dunlap. That's pretty goddamn good. You got to get to the quarterback. You got to somehow find a way to put pressure on the likes of Big Ben and Joe Flacco. They're the Browns. So I think Derek Barnett makes the most sense. I just think the Bengals here go best player available on their board. Alternative picks, again, they can maybe look at a Reuben Foster. That could potentially be there. That's probably it, because if they don't go defense, it's offensive line, and there's just no one at 9 at the offensive line spot that I don't think you could pick here. But they don't know, so they may reach, but the Bengals don't historically reach for players. Go number 10, the Buffalo Bills, a popular pick for me and for a lot of people. I'm selecting Mike Williams, the wide receiver from Clemson. I think you have to go out and replenish what you lost. Yeah, it seems like they are going to be committing for Tyrod Taylor for at least one more year, so why not give him the highest possibility to succeed? Right now you have Sammy Watkins, who has some injury concerns, but he's on the field, he's fairly good. You lost Robert Woods, you brought in, who they bring in? Philly Brown. I certainly think there's a need for the wide receiver 2 spot. And Mike Williams, as much as I personally don't have him as the #1 wide receiver, it seems like a lot of people do, and he may be the safest prospect, considering that Corey Davis was injured during a lot of the testing and the skill competition, and then you kind of got a one gimmicky type John Ross. There's still some question marks over that. So then the most solidified #1 wide receiver I can admit is probably Mike Williams. He makes a lot of sense. Make a nice little Clemson pairing between him and Sammy Watkins. He's a great, you can play off what you get in the offense from a Sammy Watkins, what you get from Philly Brown. You're going to be able to get a guy that can get separation and spread the field in Sammy Watkins. Obviously, you get a deep threat in Philly Brown. So we need that big-time possession receiver so they don't always have to go to a Charles Clay type. And I think that will be Mike Williams on that team. The alternative pick here would be a Garyon Conley trying to rebuild that secondary and really replace what they lost in Stephon Gilmore, have a partner back there with Ronald Darby, but I do think they will go Mike Williams and trying to make that offense, give them the highest chance of competing in that AFC East. Going to number 11, the first pick for the New Orleans Saints, and they were smiling. They were running all the way up to the little draft board to announce that they're selecting Reuben Foster, the linebacker from Alabama. Obviously, there's some injury concerns, I think, with Foster, that he might not be ready to start the season. There's some rumblings about that. You had the whole confrontation or whatever at the Combine, but let's not get it twisted. Reuben Foster is unbelievable talent, and for a team like the Saints, they straight up just got to go best defensive player available. There's no other way about it, and Reuben Foster would come in, be a starting Sam or Will on that team. He's better than Donnell Ellerbe. He's better than Stephon Anthony. He's a freak. You got to go with a guy that can be a centerpiece of this defense, not only a centerpiece of the defense for the future, but they are in a win-now mode. Even though the Brandon Cooks trade does not appear that they are in a win-now mode, they are. And I think a guy like Reuben Foster not only sets them up for the future, but he's also the biggest impact defender that they can get to help them win next season. Alternative pick here for me, maybe a Derek Barnett if he slips at a defensive end spot. Right now, their starting defensive ends are Cameron Jordan, not bad, but then you got pretty much a Alex Okafor, Ubam Gwachim. Pass on that. But I do think Foster will be the pick here. Go number 12, the second pick for the Cleveland Browns. I'm selecting Mitchell Trubisky, the quarterback from UNC. Cleveland kid, Cleveland Brown fan. It makes sense. Not a lot of quarterbacks want to go to Cleveland. I just don't see Cody Kessler being the only quarterback they roll with. They could very well, maybe like we said, for the Jets, want to wait till the second round to get their quarterback. But I really think with the opportunity here, it somewhat resembles when they got Johnny Manziel. They got they thought they got the better playmaker. I think it was Justin Gilbert. And then you can wait and go, okay. At least with our second pick, we fuck up. We at least hit on Myles Garrett. But I think Mitchell Trubisky probably is the highest, safest, whatever superlatives you want to put on him, quarterback in this year's draft class. I don't know if you want to say he has the highest ceiling. I don't know if you want to say he's the safest just because he came from a more suitable transitional offense from college to the pros. But, I mean, it's a good story. He definitely wants to go play in Cleveland, which is the biggest thing right now. No one really wants to go play in Cleveland. So I think, like, all the storyline things aside, he's probably, with me personally, if I had to pick a quarterback in the first round, I probably would go with Trubisky over Deshaun Watson. And, I think that makes sense for the Browns. It seems like they had him in for a lot of interviews. They worked him out heavy. I think they got to get a quarterback in this draft at some point. And they'll go with Mitchell Trubisky here. But then again, they could just, commit to just going all on the defense or just getting the best offensive player available here at 12 and then just tanking and trying to get a good quarterback next year, be it a Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Lamar Jackson. So I think an alternative pick, they may want to look at Corey Dost. I had mentioned their offense by losing Terrell Pryor. Kenny Britt doesn't really replace a Terrell Pryor. You got, Jesus Christ, so many people are adding me on goddamn Xbox Live right now. But the wide receiver spot, you got Kenny Britt, you got Corey Coleman. Corey Coleman's emerging wide receiver 2, probably, and you get a Corey Davis to pair with that. But I just think that Trubisky will be the pick here with the Browns. The first pick, everyone's like, yes, they didn't mess up. They got Myles Garrett. The second pick, when they get the quarterback, people are going to go, yeah, there's a little bit of the Cleveland Browns in that pick, but it's understandable. I just, I haven't heard any raring reviews that Kessler is going to be the QB1. I think they're going to add some competition. So why not get, hypothetically, the best quarterback in the draft, and you get him at 12, which is a way more reasonable than getting him anywhere in the top 10. Going to pick 13, the Arizona Cardinals. I've been going with Corey Davis, the wide receiver from Western Michigan. Personally, my favorite wide receiver in this year's draft class, and I think this is a forward-thinking / win-now mode. Right now, looking at the wide receivers, I think he'd come in and be a wide receiver 2-3. He could come in and compete with Larry Fitzgerald, but assuming Larry Fitzgerald is ageless wonder himself, he'll be a starter. You got John Brown, who actually missed some time, had some concussion issues and stuff like that. That's potentially like a long-term worry for the Cardinals. So there is some clouds hovering over that wide receiver spot. I think, guy like Corey Davis, forward thinking, because Larry Fitzgerald, this is his last year. So if you look at past this, you have J.J. Nelson, Jerron Brown. I mean, Jerron Brown's depth guy. J.J. Nelson offers deep threat, but that's pretty much it. So then you have John Brown going into wide receivers next year. You get a guy like Corey Davis. Not only will he be able to contribute right now and definitely be a starting wide receiver on that team, but he can learn from one of the greatest of all time in Larry Fitzgerald, understand the game, and be ready to fully take over that wide receiver 1 spot. I think if you get a guy like Corey Davis here, he could emerge on the Cardinals very similar to what Michael Thomas did with the Saints last year, where he kind of came in, second-round pick, and he straight up fucking pretty much gave them the luxury to pack Brandon Cooks' bag when he wanted to leave. So I think with the Cardinals, you could look at try to replacing Calais Campbell on the defensive line. You could look in the secondary, but I think looking at where they are, Corey Davis is the pick. The alternative pick for me here would be Garyon Conley and adding a corner, but I think they may be inclined, especially a guy like Bruce Arians, wanting to get a big-time wide receiver. Go number 14, my Philadelphia Eagles. I said I want to bet my name on this, that these are going to be the picks. This pick is something I want too much, so I don't think it's going to happen. They're going to let me down. I have Garyon Conley, the corner from Ohio State. He'd come in at round, like I said, you're starting to get the last couple of picks, guys that are probably wide receiver 2s, corner 2s, defensive lineman 2s, guys that are coming as complement. Garyon Conley, number 14, walks in and is the number 1 corner on the Philadelphia Eagles. Regardless if you have Patrick Robinson, Jalen Mills, Conley is the number 1 guy, and that's where you have to go. I absolutely hate Eagle fans that suggest we're going to get Derek Barnett. There is zero justification unless literally McCaffrey, Conley, Marshawn Lattimore, Reuben Foster is off the board. There is no dimension that we select Derek Barnett. Okay, get that through your thick skulls. I can't believe it. I get so infuriated when people try to, with a straight face, tell me that with really anyone on the board, we're fine going edge rusher at number 14. Makes zero fucking sense to me. Conley has to be the pick. Alternative pick, I think there is a little bit more than people think with Christian McCaffrey to the Philadelphia Eagles. I wouldn't be mad at that pick at all, but I would be mad at that pick if Conley is still on the board, because he's my boy. He's the guy that I want. He's the guy I've fallen in love with. Moving number 15, the Indianapolis Colts. I them taking said Christian McCaffrey, the running back from Stanford. He'd come in and compete for running back 1 spot with Frank Gore. Frank Gore, I mean, this is Frank Gore's last hurrah. I think this is going to be his last season. And even that, you start to transition your running back. McCaffrey, perfect fit for that offense. You need a running back that will be able to receive the ball. You need a running back that will be able to be an absolute game changer. And you need a running back that has superstar potential to pair with an Andrew Luck. And I think that is Christian McCaffrey. Personally, if I'm a Colts fan, I may want to get on the defensive side of the ball more. Maybe. Offensive line is never a bad show. They can look at a right tackle here at this point. There's plenty of spots that the Colts can go, but they've shown interest in Christian McCaffrey. I just think, more so long-term gain. I think when at 15, you could get an edge rusher, maybe a Takk McKinley, maybe Hassan Riddick, TJ Watt type, but do they have a high ceiling as a Christian McCaffrey? I don't think so. You can get an offensive lineman, a Ryan Ramczyk, Garrett Bowles, someone like that, Cam Robinson. But do they have as high a ceiling as a Christian McCaffrey? I don't think so. So with all those 3 positions at needs, you go with the best player available with the highest ceiling. And I think that, for me, is Christian McCaffrey. But I completely understand going edge rusher or getting an offensive lineman, really improving anywhere on that defense. So, I mean, this is one of those shake my head, goddamn Colts, go with a fucking defender. But I think McCaffrey is very scary with Andrew Luck. I think that's a terrifying Stanford combination. Alternative pick for the Colts here, I think it may be a Takk McKinley. Looking at their outside linebackers, John Simon's nice, but I think you may want something a little bit more athletic with a bigger upside, and that could be a Takk McKinley. Go number 16, the Baltimore Ravens. It's kind of getting a trend here. Baltimore Ravens either going Takk McKinley, outside linebacker from UCLA. He'd come in and be outside linebacker 2 with outside linebacker 1 being T. Sizzle. They, kind of moved on from Elvis Dumervil. And, T. Sizzle, another guy. Kind of like we talked about Frank Gore with the Colts. I think this is probably going to be the last season for Terrell Suggs. And, a team like Baltimore, you need edge rushers. And a guy like Takk McKinley, uber athletic, can come in and learn from one of the greatest of all time. Well, Okay, that's maybe not good that way. Greatest of all time. But one of the best edge rushers of this generation in Terrell Suggs. Makes a lot of sense. Safe pick for the Baltimore Ravens. High ceiling pick. You know, Baltimore Ravens always draft fairly well and make great decisions in the front office. I think Takk McKinley, they could view him as having the highest ceiling. Again, maybe Hassan Riddick could be a favorable pick here. They could go secondary, potentially. They could go wide receiver, who I think my alternate pick right now is Corey Davis for the Baltimore Ravens. But I think for me, getting an outside linebacker, defensive priority, which is where they should go, is what they're going to do. Go number 17, the Washington Redskins, either selecting Dalvin Cook, the running back from Florida State, would come in, be a running back 1. I think he would bump Fat Rob, which is disappointing for my fantasy team because I want to use Fat Rob as one of my fantasy keepers, and be a complement with Chris Thompson. You really need a game changer there at the running back spot. It's been, one of the common themes from Jay Gruden that he wants that game changer. I don't think he's really satisfied with what they have at the current running back core. Dalvin Cook, this potentially is a big slide for him, falling all the way to 17. Makes a lot of sense, man. They need a playmaker on that offensive side of the ball. They can go really anywhere. They could go at a wide receiver spot and look at maybe getting John Ross. They can go on the defensive line, maybe a Taco Charlton. But I think the best pick for them, in my opinion, would be getting a playmaker like Dalvin Cook, which would be very annoying to try to go against twice in 1 year for Philadelphia Eagles. But my alternative pick is Taco Charlton. If they don't go, Dalvin Cook. Going to pick 18, the second pick for the Tennessee Titans, either going John Ross, the wide receiver from the University of Washington. I think he'd come in on that offense, compete for a wide receiver 2 spot, maybe start as a wide receiver 3 behind Tajay Sharp and Rashard Matthews. But there's a holder with Kendall Wright gone, and I think the speed, that's a dimension they don't currently have in that wide receiver core. You clearly have your franchise quarterback in Marcus Mariota. You clearly have the running game, be it the offensive line, and a stable of running backs. So why not get a guy that can separate the field and make that running game that much more easier, as well as adding a speed dimension that you don't really have on the offense right now. This is a perfect pick this year, along with probably Leonard Fournette to the Panthers, maybe the most, perfect day 1 fit out of any pick in this year's draft. I mean, obviously Myles Garrett maybe as well. Alternative pick here could be going tight end for David Njoku. A lot of hype around the Titans really looking at the number 18 spot to get, the guy that's going to succeed Delanie Walker. So Njoku, kind of a popular name, but I think John Ross, if he's still there, is the pick. Go to 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, either going with Cam Robinson, the offensive lineman from Alabama. I think he'd come in right now and go left tackle 1. He'd bump out Donovan Smith. I think he's, as of right now, this is the way I'm seeing it. Cam Robinson, not a finished product, but better than Donovan Smith, who was, in my opinion, the weakest link out of anyone on that Tampa Bay Buccaneers team last year. And then his ceiling to turn in really to a franchise left tackle, plus his versatility. If it doesn't work out at left tackle, he may be able to swing into guard, may be able to swing over to right tackle when DeMar Dotson starts to slow down. But I think, looking at the Bucs, wide receivers are popular, not wide receivers, sorry. Running backs are popular pick, maybe a Dalvin Cook. Personally, my alternative pick here would be Derek Barnett if he takes kind of a nosedive. But I think looking at them, what do they need? And I think offensive line should be a big-time priority. And what can you get at the left tackle spot? I think a lot of scouts and people have Cam Robinson ahead of a Ryan Ramczyk. And I think the upside for Cam Robinson is versatility to be able to slide inside, but probably play left tackle is what will get him drafted to the Bucs here. And hopefully a long-term protector for Jameis Winston. Going to number 20, the Denver Broncos, either selecting Forrest Lamp, the offensive lineman from Western Kentucky. I think he'd come in and be left guard 1, bump Max Garcia, sorry Florida Gator. And, offensive line has to be where the Denver Broncos go. That was the weakness. If you're going to roll with Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch for your quarterback, you got C.J. Anderson, who's when healthy. He's a very suitable starting running back 1 in the NFL. Pair him with Devontae Booker. Run game's fine. Wide receivers are fine. You could maybe look at upgrading somewhere on the defensive side of the ball, maybe getting a little bit younger. But for me, man, I think offensive line has to be the pick. Ryan Ramczyk has been my alternative pick, and it stays that way because he is a tackle. But I think the safest offensive line prospect, the more I look at it, is probably Forrest Lamp right now because he can play tackle, but transitions best to the interior. And I think he could come in right away, be a day 1 starter at the left guard spot. But he brings versatility, so you're kind of getting a twofer, as we say up here in Canada, with a Forrest Lamp pick here for the Denver Broncos at number 20. Going to 21, the Detroit Lions, either going with Hassan Riddick, the linebacker from Temple. Again, much like where the Philadelphia Eagles at 14 got a starter, an instant starter, and Denver Broncos. Some of these picks, I'm hypothetically thinking they could start, but they may get eased in. But I think Hassan Riddick to the Lions, he's an instant starter, an outside linebacker. I think he right now would be the best available option to start. Pretty weak outside linebacking core right now. And kind of looking at their depth chart, they have Paul Warlow slated to be a starting outside linebacker. That's a tough sell for me. So Hassan Riddick, who absolutely destroyed the combine, destroyed the testing. His tape is excellent. Best, he can play inside and outside. You get versatility at the linebacker spot. He played a lot of edge in college for the University of Temple. Temple tough. I mean, Tahir Whitehead's probably the best linebacker on the roster. So it's worked before. They have their lineage to the Temple organization, the program there. So Hassan Riddick, for me, would be a phenomenal picker for the Detroit Lions that not only need help at the outside linebacker spot, being able to, a guy that can drop back into coverage, but edge rushing, getting pressure on the quarterback. Hassan Riddick kind of gets two birds stoned at once, to quote Ricky. Great pick there for the Lions. Going to 22, the Miami Dolphins. I was selecting T.J. Watt, outside linebacker from Wisconsin. I think he comes in and he could be a starting will. Be their starting will. Will 1 right now. Looking at the linebacking core, it's kind of cloudy for me a little bit because they have Kiko Alonso, Koamisi, and Lawrence Timmons. I'm not exactly sure how they plan, if they're planning on to keep on all three of those guys. But looking at that, I don't really see a guy that can get after the quarterback. I mean, Misi's been a tackle kind of guy, tackle machine in the run game. Timmons, run game. Kiko, run game. You don't really have that guy that can get outside pressure. I think a guy like T.J. Watt can do it all. He has underrated coverage ability. He can tackle in the middle. He has edge rushing ability, would probably be the best rushing outside linebacker, and he has a very, very high ceiling. I mean, you gotta remember he's only played a year or two of defense. Upside, ceiling through the roof. Great pick here for the Miami Dolphins. Good time. I think that's for sure. The alternative pick I would have is Charles Harris at defensive end. Maybe they want to get younger after Will Hayes and Cameron Wake are getting up there. Real old timers. Go number 23, the New York Giants. Either going with Ryan Ramczyk, left tackle from Wisconsin. Looking at the Giants, they're kind of in a win-now mode, and Eric Flowers is not a win-now tackle. He's one of the worst tackles in the NFL. You pretty much have to accept a bust as a bust. And you go Ryan Ramczyk, who's debatably the safest tackle prospect in this year's draft class and should be able to start day one at left tackle. Not the best thing to say that, hey, my starting left tackle to protect Eli Manning is a rookie, but he's better than Eric Flowers. Eric Flowers is an absolute turnstile. Again, simply put, Ryan Ramczyk, get a tackle. Tight end, maybe, but I think Ryan Ramczyk would offer more to this team day one than maybe a David Njoku at the tight end spot. Alternative pick is either David Njoku or Garrett Bowles at tackle for the Giants. Go number 24, the Oakland Raiders, either going with Jared Davis, the linebacker from Florida. I think inside linebacker is the biggest need for the Raiders right now, assuming the running back spot gets filled by Marshawn Lynch. That's kind of tough at this point, but I mean, looking at it, the only real available running back could be like an Alvin Kamara. I still think a guy like Jared Davis offers more on the defensive side of the ball. He'd start there. I think he would absolutely start right now inside linebacker. Very weak after they lost Perry Riley to free agency. I don't know if they have any intentions on bringing him back. Davis is a beast. Trust me, I'm trying not to have Florida Gator bias, but I think, potentially his ceiling is as high as Reuben Foster. If he can stay healthy, he's golden. Great pick here for the Raiders. Alternative pick would maybe getting Trey White at the cornerback spot and having a guy that can cover when Sean Smith starts to slow down a little bit because he's getting up there in age. Going to 25, the Houston Texans, either selecting Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback from Texas Tech. I just think that's the pick. Personally, if I'm Houston, I'd probably go tackle at this point. But I believe in Tom Savage. I at least believe in Tom Savage for giving the opportunity. But that being said, if things doesn't work with Tom Savage, where do you go? There's nowhere really for the Texans to go. So at least you get Patrick Mahomes. You don't have to rush him in. You can roll with Tom Savage, and then when he's ready, you have Bill O'Brien, who's one of the best QB minds in the NFL. They've really shown a lot of interest in Mahomes, and you're not going to be able to get him in the second round. I don't think they really have the ammunition to trade up into the second round to get him at the top end if he does slip. So I think 25 is really the only opportunity for the Texans to get one of their favorable quarterbacks. And it might not be the best pick. Personally, I may like a Garrett Bowles starting at right tackle. Derek Newton blew up both his knees last year, and you could look at upgrading that tackle spot. But Mahomes makes sense, and I think you don't have to rush him in with Tom Savage. And then eventually, he may be the franchise quarterback that the Texans wants after Tony Romo kind of honeypotted them a little bit. Go number 26, the Seattle Seahawks. Speaking of Garrett Bowles, either going with Garrett Bowles, right tackle from Utah. They lost Gary Gilliam, who went to the 49ers, I believe, for some affordable deal. You have to go offensive line for the Seattle Seahawks, and he's pretty much the best player available. I mean, looking at the board here, there's no real other offensive lineman. That's not even a bad pick. I've seen some mock drafts where Garrett Bowles is a top 10 pick. I can't remember what team picked him. Might have been the Bengals. I might have seen someone going the Bengals. I mean, obviously, kind of ridiculous, but he is a very good starting right tackle. Up there in age, there's some age concerns because, I think he's 24. You're getting some Danny Watkins territory as a Philadelphia Eagles fan. But getting Bowles, he can come in and be a starting right tackle. You compare him, you get, Britt is not a terrible center. You got Jermaine Ifedi, who you're hopefully not giving up on, even though he didn't have the strongest rookie season. That's a pretty, you have to just improve the offensive line. You can't have it continue with Russell Wilson running for his life on every single play. Right now, your starting right tackle is Obushi or something. Exactly. Garrett Bowles, upgrade, would be able to start and compete for that starting gig day one. Alternative pick would be Kevin King, because we all know they like those rangy corners. And, with the whole Richard Sherman thing, I could see them maybe going with a Kevin King, trying to replace that. Going number 27, the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm selecting Deshaun Watson, the quarterback from Clemson. He'd come in and be the quarterback 2 behind Alex Smith. No rush at all. But, this could be maybe Andy Reid's second coming of Donovan McNabb. Not really the same type of quarterbacks, but also kind of. Athletic, mobile quarterback. I could see Andy Reid having a certain vision for Deshaun Watson, and surely this is the last year you're giving Alex Smith an opportunity to be the guy. I don't think he ever will be the guy. So, I'm personally not a huge fan of this pick, but I see that being really their option. The Chiefs are kind of in a position where they don't have a lot of holes that they have to really fix. I think they may want to add a corner. You could start looking at the replacement for David Johnson, but you can get all those in the second and third round. But you're not going to be able to get a prospect like Deshaun Watson. I think when they pick in the second round, even the second-tier prospects, the Kaisers, the Davis Webbs, those guys are going to be gone. So I think you may have to pull the trigger on Deshaun Watson, a project quarterback, clearly going to a situation where he's not going to have to start. You could ease him in, which would be the best fit for Deshaun Watson. And personally, I think Deshaun Watson is my favorite quarterback in this draft class. I do believe Trubisky will go higher, but I am pulling for Deshaun Watson. He's a leader. He's everything you want in a team, and I think probably looking at least next year in 2018, I'd be more comfortable with Deshaun Watson as my quarterback than Mr. Game Manager himself, Alex Smith. The alternative pick here would be maybe getting a corner like Trey White to pair with Marcus Peters, but I think Deshaun Watson is more likely to be the pick. Going to 28, the Dallas Cowboys, I have them picking, mentioned tre'davious White, the corner from LSU. They have to get better in the secondary for the Dallas Cowboys. Trey White would come in and be probably a corner 2, corner 3. I figure Nolan Carroll's not going to start. He's going to be a depth guy. So you have Orlando Scandrick as one of your starters. Anthony Brown, is he a slot corner? He's probably more inclined to be a slot, but he could start outside. So just either or, him and Trey White would battle it out for either the starting slot gig or the starting outside role. But that's great value there for the Dallas Cowboys, who I hope don't nearly have as strong of a draft class as they did last year. Alternative pick here could be a Quincy Wilson, the corner from Florida, but I really do believe Dallas at 28 will go with the best corner available because it's not really a reach. This is where around 25 on is where the logjam of all the corners at the back end of the draft. You're going to start where you're not really reaching for these guys. I think Trey White may be the best of the bunch. Going on 29, the Green Bay Packers. Speaking of the run-on corners, I am selecting Quincy Wilson, the corner from Florida, would come in, be corner 2 or 3 on that team, very similar to the scenario with the Dallas Cowboys. I think you're probably not going to have, Davin House, Gunter be your other starting corner. I think Quincy Wilson to pair with a Quentin Rollins type. I think you're probably gonna go with Rollins as your starter. I think. Let me just pop this up so I can make this sound a little bit more professional here. Packers depth chart. When I was looking at it, you got looking at their secondary right now. You got Davin House, Demarius Randall, Quentin Rollins, Gunter. Right now, Quincy Wilson might end up being the best one of the bunch. I think, you invested the first-round pick in Demarius Randall. He's not terrible. You brought back House from Jacksonville in free agency. Maybe he can rekindle some success under Dom Capers. But I think adding a guy like Quincy Wilson, a long-rangey corner, who potentially may be even able to switch over to safety at some point when Morgan Burnett starts to slow down. You get some versatility back there, and I think he makes a nice little pick there. Alternative pick could be running back, could be Alvin Kamara. I'm not exactly sure. Or, maybe Joe Mixon if they want to be that team with the big set of nuts that drafts Joe Mixon here. But Quincy Wilson will be my pick. Pick number 30, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Either going with Charles Harris, outside linebacker from Mizzou. I personally feel Charles Harris is more suited to be a defensive end, but he's certainly athletic enough to be an outside linebacker, and he'd come in and compete for the linebacker 2 spot with James Harrison. It seems like Bud Dupree really came on near the end of the season. But James Harrison is not a long-term option. And I think outside linebacker, corner. Obviously there's some shouts. You may want to go quarterback for, who's going to be Ben Roethlisberger. Backup, there's no real, is he going to retire? Is he not going to retire? I've heard rumors that they might want to go wide receiver, but I assume Martavis Bryant will be able to come back and hopefully can get his shit together. I saw a thing that they wanted a tight end, but I think you're fine with Jesse James and Ladarius Green. So I think getting an edge rusher in Charles Harris, outside linebacker, defensive end, obviously wouldn't be a defensive end in the 3-4. Great value. This guy, Pittsburgh Steeler mentality. You know, really pretty much, you look at any interview, it looks like James Harrison 2.0 in terms of off the field. Maybe not so much, you know, posing on the front cover of a magazine with guns, but I think Charles Harris would definitely fit the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Pittsburgh Steelers mentality, as well as addressing a need. Alternative pick could potentially be a TJ Watt if he slips, but of course we had him going at 22 to the Miami Dolphins. Going to pick 31, the Atlanta Falcons. I am selecting Taco Charlton, defensive end from Michigan. I think they're going to find some way to improve that edge rush and get over Brooks Reed, who's kind of been a bust. And by kind of, I mean, I talked to my buddy who's a Falcons fan. He sucks. And they brought in Brooks Reed. Obviously, maybe the Eagles got a better pass when we got Connor Barwin from the Texans, and you guys got Brooks Reed. But I think a guy like Taco Charlton kind of slips here a little bit. Great fit for the Falcons. He'd be a defensive end one, I think. Looking at the Falcons' defensive end core, I mean, you got to get someone that can line up on the other side of the field when you have Vic Beasley on one side. And I think a nice, lengthy guy with Taco Charlton definitely would fit a Dan Quinn-type defense. And, you know, a motivator like Dan Quinn. Players want to get hype. Players want to get after it when they have Dan Quinn. And kind of with the attitude issue with Taco Charlton, I think a guy like Dan Quinn will be able to get the best out of him as opposed to some other defensive coordinators that aren't as hands-on or as aggressive. So I think that is a great fit. Alternative pick would maybe be a Forrest Lamp if he slips, maybe replacing the retired Chris Chester on the interior of the offensive line. But I think they go best edge rusher available, and that is Taco Charlton. And finish up the draft at pick 32, the Saints' second pick. I'm going with Adoree Jackson, the corner from USC. Come in and compete for that cornerback 2 spot. Right now it's P.J. Williams. I think Delvin Breaux is a decent starter, good enough starter. But you go with best secondary player. I think looking at the board right now, the more so, maybe they have Budda Baker as a nickel, not so much a safety. You could look at Kevin King. You can look at Marlon Humphrey, some of those guys that are slipping at Tease Tabor. But I think the athletic ability of Adoree Jackson, plus what he brings on special teams, you know, with his speed, you kind of get... you know, really recoup what you lost in Brandon Cook's speed on special teams with an Adoree Jackson. And then if you really can live up to the hype and play in the secondary and replicate the stats that he had with USC, which obviously he won't, but, I mean, he's uber productive at USC. The tape does a lot. He was phenomenal. I'm pretty sure he won best corner in the country, and rightfully so. So I think he may be the best playmaking defensive back available for the Saints as they go back-to-back on the defense, which they clearly have to do in a win-now mode. You have to go best corner available. They have to get a corner at either 11 or 32. And I think getting Adoree Jackson, you know, they'll be all right. They'll be all right getting Adoree Jackson here at the last pick of the first round. So there you go, guys. As I am struggling here. Fuck, I need a drink. Thank you all for tuning in to the final 32-team mock draft for Beast Mode TV. Tomorrow, I'll be releasing my final 7-round mock draft for the Philadelphia Eagles. And then Thursday, draft day is here. So shout out to all you savages that were watching all 40-some minutes of this. Pretty much a goddamn live stream. Thank you very much. And until next time, it's C4. Saying this is your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment in the comment section below if you agree or disagree with any of my picks. Smash the like button if you enjoy. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.